Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Pangolin Advisor, and if you have any questions about Endless Space 2's latest DLC called The Awakening, then you have come to the right place. The Awakening features two entirely different new features. The first being the Nickel faction, and the ships of this faction you can see in the background right now as they are rather gorgeous. Fantastic designs even. The second thing added with this DLC is the brand new Academy Empire. Now the Academy has always been featured in Endless Space 2, but now it is a full-fledged AI controlled empire that you have to take into account when playing the game in both single player and multiplayer. Now, because those two features are quite robust, I decided to split covering them into two videos. This particular video will focus entirely around the Academy. If you want, however, to learn more about the Nickel faction and their newly added minor faction as well, then you have to wait until my second video, which will deal exclusively with those ones. However, the Academy is the most important new addition in this DLC, so this is what I'm going to focus on first. I have now loaded into a game in progress. I am playing as the Nickel, but this will be a topic for a different video like I mentioned. The important part, however, is that we're just about to witness Isyander declaring the end of new roles. Now, Academy Diplomacy is something that has been added in this DLC, so I'll talk about it in depth. But first of all, and most importantly, as you may already notice, there's something quite unusual on the Galaxy screen. As you can see, a new beige empire has been added, and that is the Academy Empire. If we zoom over here, we can see that the Academy itself is still where it always was, orbiting the Harold planet in one of the randomly determined systems, but now it is not alone. It is in fact controlled by the Academy itself, so you can no longer just easily and freely colonize the system. Moreover, the Academy is also now a fully fledged empire that grows to colonize other systems, such as in this case Placidius and Zeterbia, and they have full control over it. For all intents and purposes, this empire is just as powerful and has just as much free will as other empires, to a certain degree of course, but nevertheless it is a fully fledged empire, and if you were to attack it, for instance, well, you would have to deal with the consequences of such actions. So if you want the systems that are under Academy's control, it is no longer so easy to just simply grab them. Moreover, you may not want to be on the bad side of the Academy, as those who support the Academy can be well reduced. So let us begin by talking a little bit about Isyander's new faction. Whenever you meet the Academy for the first time, you'll gain access to Academy Diplomacy. You don't have to click on this specific button which appears over every Academy controlled system. You can also alternatively go ahead and go to your diplomacy screen and then click on this newly added button to interact with the Academy. The Academy counts kind of like a different player, although this player doesn't actually have their own victory conditions per se, so you don't have to worry about the Academy winning the science of victory. But they are a very powerful independent force that you can treat as mercenaries or you can treat as a nuisance, depending on how you play it. Now, every now and again, the Academy is going to have requests for you. In this case, the Academy requests dust to be given to them. And as you can see, every player can give a certain amount of contributions to the Academy, and these contributions are publicly visible. Not the exact amount, but rather the percentage of the contributions. However, if you know how much you've pledged to the Academy, it is quite easy to calculate how much individual players already pledged. For instance, I already pledged 100 dust, which is 3%, so it is quite easy to calculate how much dust other players pledged, thanks to me knowing how much I pledged. Now, Your pledge determines what Isyander is going to do with you. If you want to please him, you have some great benefits for doing so. For instance, you may be granted a specific role. There are 4 roles within the Academy: the Librarian, the Vault Keeper, the Grand Admiral, and finally the Master of Dust. Now you may be wondering how to choose which role you want the most. It's actually kind of simple. The role that is on the leftmost of the screen is the role that you desire the most. The role that is to the right is the role that you desire least. So if I want to become a librarian and I really don't want to be a vault keeper, then I can just drag this thing to the right, and now Isyander knows that I want to be a librarian, but I don't want to be a vault keeper. Now, the way it works is that the person with the largest contribution will get their most desired role, and the person with the second largest contribution will either get their top desired role, or if it has been taken by the number 1 player, then they will be given their second most desired role, and so on and so forth. Just to showcase to you how the system works, let's make a very generous contribution that will guarantee us top rank with Isyander.
This is as it should be.
It is indeed Isyander. Now you may also be wondering what would happen if I were not to give him anything. Well, let's just say that Isyander gets a lot more cocky as the game goes on, and he will make increasing demands of you. And you will be somewhat forced to help him, or else you may be facing some unpleasant consequences. The same applies if you were to, for instance, send your fleets onto Isyander's systems and start sieging them, attacking some of Isyander's assets, and in general be a nuisance, or simply colonize the system with the Academy by yourself. This will cause Isyander to be increasingly displeased with you, and you will have to pay reparations. Those will usually require you to pay a large sum of dust. And as you might expect, should you fail to meet Isyander's demands, then he will actually send fleets to pester you and force you into obedience. So Isyander, not a very nice dude. Nevertheless, there are reasons to be on his good side, and I'll demonstrate this right now. A new turn has begun, and as you can see, I was granted the role I wanted the most because my contribution was the largest. Now, because of this, Isyander and I are considered to be allies. It is not in the strictest sense the same as being allied with any of the other major empires, but it does mean basically the same things in that I cannot attack Isyander, Isyander cannot attack me. We're buddies for the most part. Now, specific roles have specific benefits. Most importantly, every single role has a specific flagship unlocked and allows you to purchase said flagship should you have the funds to do this. Depending on the role, the flagship is different. As a librarian, I have access to the Warden of Knowledge, which is a rather menacing carrier, and in order to get it, I need to select a system where it is supposed to be spawned, and then I need to pay the dust cost of, well, spawning it. Right now I don't have the dust to do this, but I'll show you the ship later on in this video, just in case you're curious of its performance. Moreover, as a librarian, I have access to different types of secret trivia. Now, this trivia may be related to the game at hand. For instance, if I wanted to know which empire has the most influence production, I could pay a little bit of dust and Isyander would let me know. Well, this is a bug, usually it tells you far neater, so I'm playing a pre-release version, so don't worry, by the time you play this game, you should see everything fine. And it was always fine for me as well, but either way, I can now see that Horatio is the guy with the most influence production, whereas the empire with the most science production are the voters. Again, don't mind the visual bug, it happens, I suppose. However, there are also other interesting things. For instance, you can ask about the Lost, the galactic history, or Isyander's identity by paying the dust cost as well. I'll not do that right now for the very simple reason that I don't want to spoil the fun for you, and these are spoilers. You can of course sort the information you want to get, and which is going to make things a little bit easier for you with the lore tidbits at the end of it all. Another role you could ask Isyander to give you is the Vault Keeper. Now, if we have a look at the Vault Keeper, it is a fairly simple role to understand, but also a very powerful one to get, especially when you find yourself facing difficult circumstances with your people not willing to cooperate with you. For instance, right now, as you can see, I have political parties of pacifists and religious representatives. However, maybe I suddenly found a great enemy that I needed to meet on the field of battle, and I really wanted to get some militarists laws to help me out during the course of war. In that case, it is a good idea to get the Vault Keeper, as the Vault Keeper allows you to pick any of the political parties that are not represented within your empire, and you'll be able to get access to all of their laws. So, for instance, I'll pick the militarists, and now I can easily activate any of the militarist laws, with the exception of the super law, which you can never get unless you have a party that is currently leading in your empire. So that isn't changed, but every other law, if I want it, I can get it, which, as you might imagine, is very powerful. Moreover, the special flagship you can get is the Instrument of the Will, which looks quite a bit more fancy than the previous one, but don't worry, it's only going to get better than that. Another somewhat unusual role you can get is the Master of Dust. First of all, the Master of Dust obviously allows you to get the extra flagship, and in this case it is the Sum of All Pains, a rather interesting name for a rather amazing looking ship. But moreover, you also get access to Academy grants. Now this basically gives you access to some of the Academy's treasury. Unfortunately, you cannot spend this treasury as you see fit. Instead, you can grant this to somebody else. So let's say that I really like voters for some inexplicable reason, even though I personally really dislike voters and enjoyed destroying their empire, but let's ignore that for a moment. Let's say I really want them to have a lot of dust, or maybe I'm trying to get something out of them and I'm willing to pay them with dust. Let's say that I want one hidden instance and I want to give them dust for it. Well, I could use Academy's dust instead of my own. Now, the voters apparently don't like me, which is... well, I don't like them either, so there we go. But let's just say I want to be very generous and just give them a bunch of gold, or rather dust. Well, I can simply pick this contribution, and it didn't cost me anything, I didn't even have that much dust. But the voters got the money anyway, and that money came from the Academy because I am the Master of Dust. Rather interesting. You can see all of the economic grants you gave on this list, and basically there's that. It is quite useful to have the access to the extra money, but I believe that this is probably the most impactful feature. Actually, you know what? I was going to say in the multiplayer because of the interesting quirks you could, interesting deals you could make with other players, but I imagine the AI may sometimes be very much so in the need of additional dust. In most cases, I find that the AI doesn't really need dust all that much, especially on higher difficulty levels. So, on those difficulty levels, it may not be very worthwhile to become a Master of Dust, but it still can be useful sometimes. And like I said, it's best in multiplayer in my opinion, but your experience may vary. Finally, I decided to save the best for last. You can be given the role of a Grand Admiral for the Academy, and a Grand Admiral has access to a plethora of power. First of all, you can get the Colorless Fist, which is a very powerful flagship, and arguably the most powerful of all the ones you can gain access to. It is quite tremendous, even though in terms of aesthetics it is perhaps the weakest of them all. Moreover, however, you also get access to the Academy Attack Master Fleet, which you can control in any way you want. Now, this fleet isn't given to you for the eternity. Rather, you only have your time in the office, which in this case is 10 tests playing on fast game speed. So for this long I have control over his fleet, and I can use it against my enemies as if they were the Academy's enemies. So if I want to send it against the pirates, I can do that. If I want to send it against my enemies, I can do that as well. And this fleet is rather powerful. It can detect invisible foes, so it's rather devastating against Ambroqua. It has, in this case, 2 carriers and a bunch of other support ships, and it is just quite incredible. The only downside of this fleet, perhaps, is that it cannot have any heroes leading it. But nevertheless, it is still going to help you out in any wars you may be currently involved in, especially since this fleet is so massive. It will give you a very big edge if you decide to have this fleet in early game or middle game, because I can assure you that no player will be prepared for the onslaught that will be coming their way. Now, to end this video, I decided to show you one of the flagships in action. I believe this one is the Word of Knowledge. Yeah, that is the one. And I wanted to give you a brief extra tidbit of information about the implications of working with or against the Academy in regards to the meta plot, or as you may not be aware what I'm referring to the Isyander related main storyline quests that every player gets at some point in the game. So for instance, if you go against the Academy and fight against Isyander, as you might imagine, this will have fairly severe repercussions as the Academy itself will be fighting against you. Moreover, different types of players have different interactions with the Academy as well. For instance, the Nephilim can gift Academy extra systems, so everything is dependent very much so on who you're playing as and what your agenda is. Just because you're playing as the Nephilim doesn't mean you have to obey the Academy and help it, for instance. You may just as well decide to go against the Academy and tear it to pieces. And as the Nephilim, you are quite well equipped to do that actually, which is quite ironic since the Nephilim are also best equipped to be Academy's friend, so they simply have a lot of options in that regard, but this was very much so by design, I believe. Nevertheless, this is a very interesting DLC, and the Academy part of it is certainly very much so worthwhile, in my honest, humble opinion. Now, with the next video, which will hopefully go live within the next few days, I'm going to discuss the Nephilim specifically, their strengths and weaknesses, their ships, and their unique relation with the Academy and Isyander himself. Thank you very much for watching. This was Pangolin Advisor, also known as Panchaso, and I'll see you online.